April 12, 1945. Somewhere between Nuremberg and Munich. The convoy of 4 American jeeps moved carefully through the ruins of a German village whose name no one could pronounce. Corporal James Mitchell of the 45th Infantry Division sat in the second vehicle, watching smoke rise from farmhouses that had been shelled 3 days earlier. The road was lined with burned-out Wehrmacht trucks and the twisted metal of a Panzer IV that had taken a direct hit from artillery. Spring rain fell steadily, turning the unpaved roads to mud. Mitchell was 23 years old. He'd been in Europe for 11 months. Fought through France, crossed the Rhine, pushed into Germany. He'd seen things that would stay with him forever. Concentration camp survivors. Mass graves. Villages destroyed so completely that not a single building stood intact. The war was ending, everyone could feel it, but Germany was still fighting. Still killing American soldiers in a war it had already lost. The radio crackled. The lead jeep had spotted something ahead. They found him in a farmhouse cellar. A German officer, alone, wounded, sitting against a stone wall in near total darkness. His uniform was torn and covered in dried blood. His left arm hung useless at his side. But it was the insignia that made every American soldier in that cellar freeze. The twin lightning bolts. The death's head. Waffen-SS. Not just any SS officer. Major Heinrich Weber. The Americans knew the name. For 3 years, Weber had commanded a Panzer company on the Eastern Front. His unit had a reputation for ferocity that bordered on madness. They called him Der Eiserne Wolf, the Iron Wolf. Intelligence reports credited his unit with destroying over 200 Soviet tanks. But it wasn't the tactical skill that made Weber's name infamous. It was the brutality. His unit had been present at 3 villages where civilians were massacred. Not combat casualties. Executions. Women, children, elderly. Shot and left in ditches. The Americans had been hunting Weber for 6 weeks. Ever since his unit was identified operating near American lines. Higher command wanted him alive. War Crimes Tribunal. Evidence. Justice. Mitchell and his squad weren't thinking about tribunals. They were thinking about the stories. The photographs intelligence had shown them. The bodies. Weber looked up as the American soldiers surrounded him. His face was pale from blood loss. Days of stubble covered his jaw. His eyes were sunken, exhausted. He tried to stand but couldn't. The wound in his side had reopened. Fresh blood stained his uniform. He said something in German. None of the Americans understood. "You speak English?" Mitchell asked. Weber nodded slowly. "Some. Yes." His accent was heavy but comprehensible. "You're Major Heinrich Weber. Waffen-SS." It wasn't a question. Weber knew what this meant. He'd heard the stories about what happened to captured SS officers. The beatings. The summary executions. Some American units didn't bother taking SS prisoners. Too much paperwork. Too many witnesses. Too much anger. Easier to put a bullet in the back of the head and move on. Weber waited for the gunshot. It didn't come. "Get him up," said Lieutenant Carson, the ranking officer. "Colonel wants to see him." 2 soldiers grabbed Weber under the arms and pulled him to his feet. He couldn't suppress a groan. The wound in his side sent lightning through his torso. His vision blurred. They half-carried him up the cellar stairs, through the ruined farmhouse, out into the rain. The villagers watched from shattered windows. German civilians, old men and women, children. They saw the SS officer being loaded into an American jeep. No one said anything. No one tried to help. The Iron Wolf had no friends here. The convoy drove north for 20 minutes. Weber sat between 2 soldiers, hands bound with rope, his wounded arm supported awkwardly across his lap. The pain was constant now. Deep, throbbing. He'd been wounded 4 days earlier in a firefight with an American patrol. Shrapnel from a grenade. The field medic in his unit had bandaged it, given him morphine, told him he needed a hospital. But there were no hospitals anymore. The Wehrmacht medical system had collapsed. The SS took care of its own, but Weber's unit was scattered. Hunted. dying in small groups across Bavaria. He'd hidden in that farmhouse cellar for 3 days. Ate what little food he could find. Drank rainwater collected in a helmet. Waited for either rescue or death. Now he had neither. The American base was a requisitioned German military barracks outside a town called Kaufbeuren. Guard towers. Barbed wire. Rows of temporary prisoner cages built from chain-link fence and wooden posts. The cages were full. German soldiers. Hundreds of them. Wehrmacht regulars, Luftwaffe ground crew, Hitler youth fighters who looked like children. They watched as the convoy arrived. Watched as American soldiers pulled the wounded SS officer from the jeep. Some prisoners recognized the insignia. Word spread quickly. SS officer. SS major. No one cheered. No one jeered. The prisoners just watched. They knew what this meant. If Weber was here, the war really was ending. The SS didn't surrender. They died fighting. If Weber had surrendered, if the Iron Wolf had given up, then everything was lost. Weber was taken to a separate building. Not the prisoner cages. An interrogation facility. Inside, the guards pushed him down onto a wooden chair in a concrete-walled room with a single bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling. His hands were still bound. Blood had soaked through the bandage on his side. He was shivering. Fever or shock or both. Colonel Richard Brennan entered the room 20 minutes later. Brennan was 42 years old. Career officer. 2 wars. He'd fought in France in 1918, earned a Silver Star at Below Wood. He'd spent this war commanding intelligence operations. Interrogating prisoners. Gathering evidence. Building cases for war crimes prosecution. He'd seen the photographs from Dachau. Seen the survivors. Seen what the SS had done. Brennan pulled a chair across from Weber. Sat down. Lit a cigarette. Studied the German officer for a long moment. Weber met his gaze. Didn't look away. Didn't speak. You know why you're here, Brennan said. Not a question. A statement. Yes, Weber replied. War crimes. Civilian massacres. Free villages. Hundreds of dead. Weber's expression didn't change. I know what I am accused of. Not accused. Evidence. Photographs. Witnesses. Bodies. Silence. The light bulb hummed. Rain drummed on the roof. Somewhere outside, a guard shouted orders in English. Brennan leaned forward. I've been doing this for months. Interrogating SS officers. You know what I've learned? Every single one of you says the same thing. I was following orders. I didn't know. It wasn't me. Like you're reading from a script. Like you think saying those words will make any difference. Weber said nothing. So here's how this works, Brennan continued. You're going to tell me everything. Your unit. Your commanding officers. Operations. Dates. Locations. Who gave the orders? Who executed them? Who was present? Every detail. And in exchange, you get to live long enough to stand trial. Maybe. Or you can stay silent, and I turn you over to the Russians. Your choice. The Russians. Weber had fought the Russians for 3 years. He knew what Soviet forces did to captured SS officers. They didn't bother with trials. Just ropes and lampposts. Or walls and firing squads. Quick deaths if you were lucky. Slow ones if you weren't. I will answer your questions, Weber said quietly. But I need medical attention. I am bleeding. Brennan looked at the blood spreading across Weber's uniform. Considered. Then stood and walked to the door. Spoke to someone outside. Returned to his seat. Medic is coming. While we wait, start talking. And Weber did. The American medic who arrived 15 minutes later was a thin man in his 30s named Lawrence Kennedy. Combat medic. 101st Airborne. He'd parachuted into Normandy, survived Market Garden, fought through the Bulge. He'd seen more wounds than most surgeons. Saved men who should have died. Lost men who should have lived. Kennedy looked at the SS major with undisguised contempt. He'd been at Dachau. One of the first American medics through the gates. The images were burned into his brain. Living skeletons. Mountains of corpses. Gas chambers. He knew what the SS had done. "Take off your tunic," Kennedy said. His voice was flat. Professional. Empty of emotion. Weber struggled with the buttons. His left arm wouldn't cooperate. Kennedy grabbed the fabric and tore it open. Buttons scattered across the concrete floor. He peeled back the blood-soaked bandage. The wound was infected. The edges were red and swollen. Pus mixed with blood. The grenade shrapnel had torn through muscle and possibly nicked the intestine. Weber needed surgery. Proper antibiotics. For fluids. Things that weren't available in a prisoner interrogation facility. Kennedy cleaned the wound with iodine. Weber gritted his teeth but didn't cry out. The pain was incredible. Kennedy packed the wound with fresh gauze, wrapped it tightly, gave Weber a morphine injection. "He needs a hospital," Kennedy said to Brennan. "He gets what I give him," Brennan replied. Kennedy packed his medical bag. Started to leave. Stopped. Looked back at Weber. "You should know something. The 101st liberated a concentration camp 2 weeks ago. Place called Coffering. It was a subcamp of Dachau. We found 900 prisoners. Starved. Beaten. Worked to death. You know what the guards did before they ran? Locked the barracks and set them on fire. Burned the prisoners alive. We pulled bodies out of those buildings for 3 days." Weber said nothing. "Your uniform," Kennedy continued. "Those insignia. That's what they represent. Not honor. Not duty. Murder. So yeah, I'll patch you up because that's my job. But don't mistake that for sympathy." Kennedy left. The door closed. Brennan lit another cigarette. "Now," he said. "Start from the beginning." Over the next 3 hours, Weber talked. His voice was steady despite the pain. Despite the morphine beginning to dull his awareness. Despite knowing that every word he spoke was further evidence against him. He'd joined the Waffen-SS in 1939. Not out of ideology. Out of ambition. The SS offered faster promotions. Better equipment. Elite status. He was 22 years old. Wanted to serve Germany. Wanted to be part of something larger than himself. Believed the propaganda about defending the fatherland against Bolshevism and Jewish Bolshevik conspiracy. Believed Germany had been betrayed in the First World War. Believed Hitler would restore German greatness. He spent the first year of the war in Poland. Then France. Then prepared for the invasion of Britain that never came. In June 1941, his unit crossed into the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa. The largest invasion in human history. 3 million German soldiers. Thousands of tanks. The Luftwaffe darkening the sky. They would crush the Red Army in 6 weeks. Take Moscow. End the war before winter. It didn't work that way. Weber described the Eastern Front with the clinical detachment of someone recounting a nightmare they no longer fully believed had happened. The scale of the fighting. Battles involving hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Cities destroyed. Entire armies encircled and annihilated. By winter 1941, his Panzer company was outside Moscow, freezing in temperatures that dropped to -40 degrees. The tanks wouldn't start. The soldiers had no winter equipment. Frostbite killed as many men as Russian bullets. They fell back. Regrouped. Spring came. The Wehrmacht pushed forward again. Weber's unit fought at Kharkov. At Kursk. At places whose names meant nothing to Americans but represented apocalyptic battles where hundreds of thousands died in days. By 1943, Weber was a captain. By 1944, a major. He'd survived when 90% of his original unit was dead. Luck. Skill. Ruthlessness. And the villages. Brennan asked about them directly. 3 villages. 3 massacres. What happened? Weber hesitated. This was different from describing battles. This required admitting things that had no military justification. No tactical purpose. Acts that even under SS doctrine crossed lines. Partisan activity, Weber said finally. The villages were suspected of harboring Soviet partisans. We were ordered to conduct anti-partisan operations. Anti-partisan operations, Brennan repeated. Is that what you call murdering civilians? We were following orders. There it is. Following orders. I told you that's what they all say. Weber looked at Brennan. What would you have done? Refused? Disobeyed a direct order from SS command? You know what happens to SS officers who refuse orders. They are shot. Cowardice. Defeatism. Treason. Those are capital offenses. Would you have chosen death over obedience? I would have chosen not to join the SS, Brennan said. Easy to say now. After the war is lost. After you know how it ends. In 1939, in 1940, we were winning. Germany was triumphant. The Wehrmacht was invincible. Would you have stood against that? Would you have risked everything to oppose your government? Your country? The question hung in the air. Brennan had no answer. Or rather, he had the answer everyone gives when they're not the one being tested. Yes. I would have resisted. I would have been different. But would he? Would anyone? The interrogation continued. Brennan took notes. Names. Dates. Unit designations. Who gave the orders? How the massacres were carried out. How many civilians? Whether there were survivors. Whether Weber personally killed anyone. Weber answered. Sometimes hesitantly. Sometimes directly. The morphine was wearing off. Pain was returning. His vision blurred. He asked for water. Brennan nodded to the guard, who brought a metal cup. Weber drank. His hand shook. Why didn't you run? Brennan asked. You had 4 days in that cellar. You could have changed into civilian clothes. Disappeared. Thousands of German soldiers are doing exactly that. Taking off their uniforms. Going home. Pretending they were never soldiers. Why didn't you? Weber considered the question. Where would I go? My family is dead. My home is destroyed. I have no papers. No money. No identity except this uniform. And even if I ran, even if I hid, eventually someone would recognize me. Someone from my unit. Someone who saw what we did. Running only delays what cannot be avoided. So you surrendered. I accepted reality. By evening, Brennan had filled 12 pages of notes. Weber had provided enough information for multiple war crimes charges. Confessed to being present at the massacres. Admitted following orders to execute civilians. Provided names of other officers involved. Everything the prosecution would need. That's enough for today, Brennan said. He stood. Gathered his notes. Guard will take you to a holding cell. We'll continue tomorrow. Colonel, Weber said. The medic. He said I need a hospital. You'll get medical attention. After I'm finished. I am dying. Brennan looked at him. Maybe. But slowly enough for what I need. The guard took Weber to a cell. A concrete room. 8 feet by 10 feet. A metal cot. A bucket. A barred window 8 feet up. Nothing else. They untied his hands. Closed the door. The lock clicked. Weber lay on the cot. Pain radiated from his side. Fever was building. Infection spreading. He thought about the morphine Kennedy had given him. How good it felt when the pain stopped. How he wanted more. But there wouldn't be more. Not until Brennan needed him conscious and talking. He thought about his trial. About standing in a courtroom while prosecutors presented evidence. Photographs. Witness testimony. His own confession. About the verdict that was already decided. About the sentence. Hanging. Probably. Or firing squad. Either way, dead. He thought about his family. His father had been a schoolteacher in Hamburg. Killed in an RAF bombing raid in 1943. His mother had died of typhus in 1944. His brother had been killed at Stalingrad. His sister had fled to Austria. He didn't know if she was still alive. The Weber family had given everything to Germany. And Germany had destroyed them. He thought about the villages. About the faces he remembered. An old woman who had begged in German. A child who had tried to run. A man who had stood absolutely still, knowing it wouldn't matter. He remembered pulling the trigger. Multiple times. Following orders. Doing his duty. Being a good soldier. He remembered believing it was necessary. That these were enemies of the Reich. That partisan activity required harsh response. That mercy was weakness. That the SS made hard decisions so Germany could survive. All the reasons that had made sense at the time. That had allowed him to sleep at night. That had turned him into something he now couldn't recognize. Weber closed his eyes. Sleep wouldn't come. The pain was too intense. But exhaustion eventually pulled him under. The guard on night duty was Private First Class Robert Hartley. 20 years old. From Nebraska. He'd been in Europe for 7 months. Infantry replacement after the Bulge. He'd seen combat but not much. His unit had crossed the Rhine in late March, pushed into Germany, encountered scattered resistance but nothing like what the veterans described from Normandy or the Ardennes. Hartley walked past Weber's cell every 30 minutes. Standard procedure. Check on the prisoner. Make sure he hasn't tried to escape or harm himself. Most of the job was boring. Hours of nothing. But this prisoner was different. This was an SS major. A war criminal. Someone important enough that Colonel Brennan personally interrogated him. At 0200 hours, Hartley heard something. A sound from Weber's cell. Groaning. He stopped. Listened. The sound came again. Pain. Someone in severe pain. Hartley approached the cell door. Looked through the viewing slot. Weber was lying on the cot, curled on his side. His face was soaked with sweat. His uniform was drenched. Blood had soaked through the bandage again. "Hey," Hartley said. "You okay?" Stupid question. Obviously the man wasn't okay. Weber didn't respond. Either couldn't hear or couldn't answer. Hartley unlocked the door. Standard procedure said don't enter a prisoner cell alone. Always have backup. But the base was undermanned. Guards were spread thin. And this prisoner was wounded. Barely conscious. Not exactly dangerous. Hartley entered the cell. Crouched next to the cot. Weber's eyes were half open. Unfocused. Fever had him. Bad. Hartley touched Weber's forehead. Burning hot. The infection was out of control. This man needed immediate medical attention. Not tomorrow. Not after Colonel Brennan finished interrogating him. Now. Hold on, Hartley said. I'm getting the medic. He left the cell. Didn't lock it. Ran to the medical station. Kennedy was asleep on a cot. Hartley shook him awake. The SS major. Something's wrong. I think he's dying. Kennedy grabbed his medical bag. They ran back to the cell. Kennedy examined Weber. Checked his pulse. His temperature. Looked at the wound. The infection had spread significantly since the afternoon. Red streaks ran from the wound site. Blood poisoning. Sepsis. Without antibiotics and surgery, Weber had maybe 24 hours. We need to move him to the hospital, Kennedy said. Brennan said. I don't care what Brennan said. This man dies, there's no trial. No evidence. No justice. Just another dead German. You think that's what Brennan wants? Hartley hesitated. Then nodded. I'll call it in. He used the field telephone. Woke up the duty officer. Explained the situation. The duty officer said he'd contact Colonel Brennan. 20 minutes later, Brennan arrived at the cell. Looked at Weber. At Kennedy. At the blood-soaked bandages. If we don't operate in the next few hours, he's dead, Kennedy said. Brennan considered. Fine. Move him to the base hospital. But he stays under guard. Armed guard. 24 hours. They transported Weber in an ambulance. 2 guards rode with him. Kennedy monitored his vital signs. Weber was barely conscious. Mumbling in German. Delirium from the fever. The base hospital was a converted German military facility. Operating rooms. Surgical staff. American Army doctors who treated thousands of wounded soldiers over the past year. Weber was taken directly to surgery. The operation took 3 hours. The surgeon removed the shrapnel fragments. Cleaned out the infected tissue. Repaired the intestinal damage. Started 4 antibiotics. By 0600 hours, Weber was in recovery. Still unconscious but stable. Hartley pulled guard duty at Weber's bedside. He sat in a chair next to the hospital bed, M1 carbine across his lap, watching the SS Major sleep. Or maybe he was dying. Hard to tell sometimes. Weber's breathing was shallow. His face was pale. But the fever was breaking. The antibiotics were working. Hartley had time to think. About who this man was. What he'd done. The villages. The massacres. The SS uniform that represented everything evil about Nazi Germany. But also just a man. A wounded man. A dying man who'd needed help. And Hartley had helped him. Not because Weber deserved it. But because it was the right thing to do. Because letting someone die when you could save them wasn't justice. It was just cruelty. At 0800 hours, Weber's eyes opened. Slowly. Confused. He looked around. Saw the hospital room. Saw Hartley. Saw the rifle. Understanding returned gradually. He was alive. The Americans had saved him. Why? Thirsty, Weber said. His voice was barely a whisper. Hartley poured water from a pitcher. Held it to Weber's lips. Weber drank. A few sips. Enough. Thank you, Weber said. Hartley said nothing. Set down the cup. Returned to his chair. They sat in silence. Outside, the war continued. American and British forces were closing in on Berlin. The Red Army was already fighting in the city streets. Hitler was in his bunker. The Third Reich was dying. And in this hospital room, an American private guarded a German major whose life he'd helped save. Over the next 3 days, Weber recovered. The infection receded. His strength returned slowly. He could sit up. Eat. Speak without the fever-driven confusion. The doctors said he'd survive. They'd move him back to the prisoner facility in a few days. Back to the interrogations. Back to awaiting trial. Hartley remained on guard duty. 12-hour shifts. Someone had to watch the prisoner. Might as well be him. He'd requested the assignment. Not sure why. Maybe because he'd been there when Weber nearly died. Maybe because he felt responsible. Maybe because something about the situation bothered him. On the second day, Weber spoke. You saved my life. Hartley was reading a paperback. A Western novel. Something to pass the time. He looked up. Medic saved your life. I just called him. You could have let me die. Many would have. Yeah. Maybe. Why didn't you? Good question. Hartley had asked himself the same thing. Wasn't my call to make. You're a prisoner. You get medical attention. That's the rules. Rules. Weber almost smiled. Bitter. The SS had rules too. Following them made us monsters. You follow rules that make you humane. Interesting. Hartley didn't respond. Weber was quiet for a while. Then, how old are you? 20. I am 31. Feels older. You have family? Parents. 2 brothers. Back in Nebraska. They are alive. Good. Mine are all dead. Father, mother, brother. My sister, I do not know. Probably dead also. Sorry, Hartley said. Automatic response. Then caught himself. Why was he expressing sympathy to an SS major? War destroys everything, Weber said. Not just the losers. Winners also. You will return home, but you will carry this with you. Everything you have seen. Everything you have done. It will be there forever. I haven't done anything like what you did. You have killed. Hartley had killed. 6 weeks ago. A firefight near Mannheim. German soldiers defending a bridge. Hartley had fired his rifle. Saw one of them fall. Never knew if his bullet was the one. Maybe. Probably. He didn't think about it much. Tried not to. That's combat, Hartley said. Not the same as murdering civilians. No. Not the same. But still killing. Still something that changes you. You understand this? Hartley did understand. He'd felt it. That moment when you realize you've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. That you're capable of taking a life. That under the right circumstances, or wrong circumstances, you can kill another human being and keep functioning. Keep breathing. Keep existing. What was it like? Hartley asked. Being SS, doing what you did. Weber was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was different. Quieter. More honest. At first, I believed. I thought we were defending Germany. Protecting our people. Fighting for our survival. The propaganda was very effective. The training was very thorough. They taught us that Slavs were subhuman. That Jews were parasites. That communists would destroy Western civilization. And we believed it. Or enough of us believed it that the rest went along. He paused. The first time my unit executed civilians, I was not present. I heard about it after. Felt relief that I had missed it. Told myself I would have refused if ordered. But I knew I would not have refused. Because refusal meant death. Or disgrace. Or being branded a coward. And I was not brave enough for that kind of courage. But you were there. At the villages. You admitted it. Yes. I was there. The second village, third village. By then it was routine. We would surround the village. Round up everyone. Someone from SS intelligence would accuse them of partisan activity. We would select the men. Sometimes the women. Children if they were old enough to be considered threats. We would take them to a field or forest. Make them dig. Then shoot them. Mass graves. Hartley felt sick. How could you do that? You stop seeing them as people. You see them as enemy. As abstract. You tell yourself it is necessary. That your superiors know things you do not. That war requires hard choices. That if you do not do this, someone else will. And if you refuse, you will be punished. So you do it. And then you do it again. And again. Until it becomes normal. Until you cannot remember when it shocked you. But you knew it was wrong. Yes. I knew. Deep down, I knew. But knowing something is wrong and stopping it are different things. I chose survival. I chose obedience. I chose not to be the one who stood up and said no. And now I am here. Dying slowly from infection. Waiting to stand trial for crimes I cannot deny. Waiting for execution I deserve. So yes, I knew. And it did not matter. They sat in silence. The hospital hummed with activity. Nurses moved between beds. Doctors made rounds. Wounded American soldiers recovered from injuries sustained in the final weeks of the war. And in one room, an American guard and a German war criminal talked about choices and consequences. Why are you telling me this? Hartley asked. Because you asked. Because you are young enough that my answer might matter. Because in 10 years, someone will ask you about the war. About what you saw. What you did. What you learned. And you will have to answer. I am showing you what the wrong answer looks like. The next day, Colonel Brennan visited. He stood at the foot of Weber's bed. Studied the German major who now looked significantly healthier. Doctors say you're recovering. Good. We'll resume interrogation in 2 days. I will answer your questions, Weber said. I know you will. You don't have a choice. May I ask something? Brennan raised an eyebrow. You can ask. The war. How long? Days. Maybe a week. Berlin's surrounded. Hitler's probably already dead. Your generals are surrendering. It's over. Weber absorbed this. He'd known, of course. Everyone knew. But hearing it confirmed was different. Germany had lost. Everything they'd fought for. Everything they'd sacrificed. Everything they'd done. All of it meaningless. All of it for nothing. What happens after trial? Weber asked. You're convicted, you hang. Or firing squad. Depends on the tribunal. No chance of acquittal. None. The evidence is overwhelming. Your own confession is overwhelming. You're guilty. The only question is what sentence. Weber nodded. Expected this. How long until trial? Months. Maybe a year. Depends on how many war criminals we catch. Depends on how backed up the system gets. You'll wait. In a prisoner camp. Under guard. Until your number comes up. And then I die. Yes. And then you die. Brennan left. Hartley remained. Weber looked at the ceiling. Thought about time. Months of waiting. Maybe a year. Living in a cell. Knowing exactly how it ends. Watching the calendar. Counting down to execution. That was its own kind of torture. Not physical. Psychological. The condemned man waiting for his appointment with death. Do you believe in God? Weber asked suddenly. Hartley was surprised. I guess. Went to church growing up. Don't think about it much. I was raised Lutheran. Stopped believing during the war. Hard to believe in God when you see what men do to each other. But now, facing death, I wonder. Is there judgment after? Is there hell? Am I going there? I don't know, Hartley said honestly. If hell exists, you might be. For what you did. Yes. I think so too. Perhaps hell is just remembering. Forever remembering. Every face. Every scream. Every life taken. That would be sufficient punishment. They were quiet. Weber closed his eyes. Not sleeping. Just thinking. Remembering. All those faces he couldn't forget. On the 4th day, something unexpected happened. A group of liberated concentration camp survivors arrived at the base. They were being processed. Medical evaluation. Documentation. Preparation for repatriation or emigration. About 40 people. Mostly Jews from Poland and Germany. Starved. Traumatized. Carrying tattoos from Auschwitz or Dachau or Buchenwald. One of them, a man named David Steinberg, was being treated for malnutrition and pneumonia. The doctors put him in the same hospital ward as Weber. Different room, but same floor. Steinberg was 62 years old. Before the war, he'd been a tailor in Berlin. Had a shop. A wife. 3 children. The Nazis had taken everything. His shop confiscated. His family sent to camps. His wife and 2 children murdered at Treblinka. His eldest son killed at Auschwitz. Steinberg himself had survived 3 years at Dachau. Working as a tailor for the SS, making uniforms. Fixing clothes. Staying useful enough to avoid selection for the gas chambers. On the morning of the 4th day, Steinberg was walking in the hospital corridor. Physical therapy. Rebuilding strength. He passed Weber's room. Saw the guard at the door. Saw the prisoner in the bed. Saw the SS uniform hanging on a chair. Saw the face. Steinberg stopped. Stared. Recognition hit him like a physical blow. He knew that face. He'd seen it before. At Dachau. 3 years ago. An SS officer who had visited the tailor workshop. Brought uniforms for repair. Steinberg remembered the face because this officer had spoken to him. Not cruelly. Just matter-of-factly. Asked about the work. How long repairs took. Whether the quality was satisfactory. A normal conversation. Professional. As if they were two men discussing business. Not a prisoner and his jailer. Not a Jew and an SS officer in a death camp. Steinberg's hands began to shake. The memories flooded back. The workshop. The other prisoners. The constant terror. The daily selections. The smoke from the crematorium. And this officer. This face. Standing in that workshop. Speaking German. Asking questions. Then leaving. Going back to whatever SS officers did in concentration camps. Command. Supervise. Execute. Hartley saw Steinberg standing there. Saw the old man's face go pale. Saw him trembling. Sir. Are you okay? Steinberg couldn't speak. Just pointed. At Weber. At the SS uniform. His fingers shook. Weber opened his eyes. Saw Steinberg. Their eyes met. And Weber recognized him too. The tailor. From Dachau. The man who had repaired his uniform. Who had worked quickly and efficiently. Who had spoken softly when spoken to. Who had survived by being useful. You, Steinberg said finally. His voice was barely audible. I know you. Weber said nothing. What could he say? What words existed for this moment? Dachau, Steinberg continued. The tailor workshop. 1942, you brought uniforms. I fixed them. Yes, Weber said quietly. I remember. Steinberg's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the corridor floor. Tears ran down his face. Not tears of rage. Not tears of grief. Just tears. Years of them. Held back. Repressed. Survived. Now flowing freely because he'd seen the face of someone from that place. That hell. And that face was here. Human. Wounded. Dying. Not a monster. Just a man. Hartley helped Steinberg to his feet. Sir, let me get you back to your room. No, Steinberg said. I need to speak to him. Please. I need to speak to him. Hartley looked uncertain. This violated every protocol. You don't allow interaction between prisoners and witnesses. Especially not SS officers and concentration camp survivors. But Steinberg was begging. And Weber was nodding. Accepting. Understanding that this needed to happen. 5 minutes, Hartley said. I'll be right here. He helped Steinberg into Weber's room. Found a chair. Steinberg sat. Weber propped himself up on the hospital bed. They looked at each other. Two men. One had been in the camp as a guard. One had been there as a prisoner. Both had survived. Both carried scars that would never heal. Why were you at Dachau? Steinberg asked. You were a soldier. I saw your rank. Panzer officer. Why were you at the camp? My unit was stationed nearby. We used the camp workshops for uniform repairs. Leather work. Tailoring. It was convenient. Did you know? What was happening there? Weber could have lied. Could have claimed ignorance. Claimed he never saw the selections. The gas chambers. The crematorium. But Steinberg had been there. He knew what was visible. What everyone who worked there could see. Yes, Weber said. I knew. And you did nothing. I did nothing. Steinberg wiped his eyes. My son. Ephraim. He was 23. He played violin. Beautiful music. They killed him. Selected him for medical experiments. Dr. Mengele. You know this name? Yes. I know the name. Ephraim screamed. I heard him. From the workshop, I heard him. They cut him. No anesthesia. Tested things. Recorded data. Then they killed him. Put his body in the crematorium. Like garbage. My son. Weber's throat was tight. I am sorry. Sorry. Steinberg laughed. Bitter. Broken. Sorry. You are sorry. All of you are sorry now. After the war is lost. After the camps are found. After the world knows. Now you are sorry. Where was sorry when my son was screaming? Where was sorry when my wife was sent to the gas? Where was sorry when 3 million Jews were murdered? Weber had no answer. There was no answer. Sorry was meaningless. Sorry was insulting. Sorry was what you said when you knocked over someone's drink. Not when you participated in genocide. They sat in silence. Steinberg cried. Weber watched. Hartley stood by the door. Uncomfortable. Witnessing something he didn't fully understand. Finally, Steinberg spoke again. I want to tell you something. When you came to the workshop that day. When you asked about the repairs. You spoke to me like a human being. Not like an animal. Not like trash. Like a person. Just for 1 minute. And I remembered that. In all the horror. In all the degradation. I remembered that one SS officer who spoke to me like I was still human. Weber closed his eyes. That does not absolve me. No. It does not. Nothing absolves you. You are going to hell. If God exists, you are going to hell. But I wanted you to know. That moment mattered. Not enough. Not nearly enough. But it mattered. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to understand something. You are not a monster. Monsters would be easier to accept. Easier to hate. Easier to dismiss. But you are a man. An ordinary man who did monstrous things. And that is more terrifying. Because it means any man could do what you did. Given the right circumstances. The right indoctrination. The right pressure. Any man could become what you became. Even me. And I need you to understand that. Before you die. Before you face whatever judgment awaits. You need to understand that you were not special. Not uniquely evil. Just human. Terribly, horrifyingly human. Steinberg stood. His legs were unsteady. Hartley helped him. Are we done? Hartley asked. Yes, Steinberg said. We are done. He looked at Weber one final time. I forgive you. Not because you deserve forgiveness. Not because it changes anything. But because I need to forgive. Because carrying hatred for the rest of my life would kill me. And I have survived too much to die from hatred. So I forgive you. And I hope you suffer for what you did. And I hope you find some kind of peace before the end. Both things. Simultaneously. Because that is what you deserve. Steinberg left. Hartley helped him back to his room. Weber lay in the hospital bed. Tears ran down his face. The first tears he'd cried since the war began. Since everything started. Since he'd chosen the uniform and the ideology and the violence. Tears for what he'd done. For what he'd become. For what he'd destroyed. For the recognition that he would carry this weight until death. And possibly beyond. Major Heinrich Weber recovered enough to be transported back to the prisoner facility 2 days later. The interrogations resumed. Brennan compiled evidence. Built his case. Prepared for trial. Weber cooperated fully. Answered every question. Provided every detail requested. Not because he expected mercy. But because Steinberg was right. He was going to hell. Might as well deserve it completely. The trial was held 6 months later. Military tribunal. 3 American judges. Prosecutors presented evidence. Photographs from the villages. Testimony from survivors. Weber's own confessions. The defense attorney, a young American captain assigned to the case, tried to argue that Weber was following orders. That he feared for his own life if he refused. That he was not the architect of the massacres, merely a participant. The judges were unmoved. The verdict was guilty. 3 counts of crimes against humanity. 3 counts of murder. The sentence was death by hanging. To be carried out within 30 days. Weber showed no emotion when the sentence was read. He'd known this was coming. Had accepted it months ago. In his cell, he wrote letters. Not many. There was no one left to write to. But he wrote to the families of the victims whose names he could remember. Wrote that he was sorry. Wrote that he knew sorry meant nothing. Wrote that he would carry their faces to whatever came after death. Most letters were returned unopened. A few were delivered. He never received responses. He also wrote a letter to David Steinberg. Thanked him for the forgiveness. Said he didn't deserve it. Said he understood why Steinberg needed to give it. Said that the moment in the Dachau workshop had been the only time during the war when Weber had acted like a human being instead of a soldier. That single moment of treating another person with basic dignity. And it had been so rare, so unusual, that Steinberg remembered it. That was the measure of what the SS had become. What Weber had become. A man for whom one moment of basic human decency was noteworthy. Steinberg received the letter. Read it. Cried. Then carefully folded it and placed it in a box with his few possessions. He would keep it. Not as absolution for Weber. But as a reminder. A warning. About what humans are capable of. About what ordinary men can become. About why vigilance matters. About why, never again, must mean something. Private First Class Robert Hartley was present at the execution. Not by choice. He'd been assigned. Guards who'd worked with the prisoner were required to attend. To bear witness. To see justice carried out. Hartley stood in the yard of the military prison in Landsberg. The same prison where Adolf Hitler had been held after the Beer Hall Putsch in 1923. History's ironies were endless. Weber walked to the gallows calmly. No resistance. No final speech. The executioner asked if he had any last words. Weber looked at the assembled witnesses. American soldiers. German civilians required to attend as part of denazification. Newspaper reporters. He saw Hartley. Their eyes met. Tell the truth, Weber said. About what we did. About how ordinary men became monsters. Tell the truth. So it cannot happen again. That is all. The hood was placed over his head. The noose adjusted. The trap door opened. Weber dropped. His neck broke instantly. Death was quick. More merciful than he deserved. More merciful than his victims received. Hartley watched. Felt nothing. No satisfaction. No relief. Just emptiness. He'd guarded this man. Talked with him. Saved his life so he could stand trial and be executed. Was that justice? Was that mercy? Was that revenge? He didn't know. Maybe it was all 3. Maybe it was none. After the execution, Hartley shipped home. Returned to Nebraska. Got a job. Got married. Had children. Lived a normal life. But he carried the war with him. Carried the memory of Weber. The conversations in the hospital. The execution. The understanding that under different circumstances, in different times, he might have made similar choices. That the line between good and evil was thinner than anyone wanted to admit. That humanity was fragile. That civilization was fragile. That everything could break. Years later, Hartley's grandson asked him about the war. What it was like. What he did. What he learned. And Hartley told him about Major Heinrich Weber. About the feared SS officer who turned out to be just a man. A man who made terrible choices. Who followed evil orders. Who participated in atrocities. Who knew it was wrong and did it anyway. Who was caught and tried and executed. Who died knowing he deserved worse. And Hartley told his grandson the most important thing he'd learned. That monsters are easy. You can fight monsters. Kill them. Defeat them. Celebrate victory. But Weber wasn't a monster. He was a man. And that meant anyone could become what he became. Any nation could fall into what Germany fell into. Any ideology could corrupt what Nazism corrupted. Any person could make the choices Weber made. So what do you do? His grandson asked. If anyone can become evil. You resist, Hartley said. Every day. Every moment. Every choice. You resist. You choose humanity. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Because the alternative is Major Weber. The alternative is those villages. The alternative is Dachau. And if we don't resist, if we don't choose better, then it happens again. Somewhere. Somehow. It happens again. The grandson nodded. Understanding partially. Would understand fully later. When he was older. When he faced his own choices. His own pressures. His own moments where doing the right thing cost something. He would remember his grandfather's story. Remember the SS major. Remember the warning. That was the legacy. Not triumph. Not justice. Just memory. And the responsibility memory carries. The obligation to learn. To remember. To resist. To choose humanity even when humanity is difficult. Especially then. Heinrich Weber died in 1945. David Steinberg died in 1989, having survived to see his 91st birthday. Robert Hartley died in 2003, having lived a long and unremarkable life, carrying one remarkable story. The villages remain. Rebuilt. Inhabited. But marked. Memorials stand where the massacres occurred. Names carved in stone. Testimony preserved in museums. Evidence maintained in archives. And in those archives, in file boxes marked, War Crimes, and, Nuremberg Tribunal, and, SS Personnel, Heinrich Weber's story sits alongside thousands of others. Men who were feared. Who committed atrocities. Who were captured. Who were tried. Who were found guilty. Who were executed. Men who were expected to be monsters. But who were found to be just men. Ordinary men who made extraordinary evil choices. And in their ordinariness lay the real terror. The real warning. The real lesson that every generation must learn again. They expected a monster. They found a man. And that was the most horrifying discovery of all.